Here we are at the Charles Hotel in North Perth to witness a special 40th anniversary performance by one and only WA legend Dave Warner.
40 years and it's gone like that. And it's only appropriate that I should be back doing some new material, just as it was new material then. But anyway, for now, it's balls in the air. I packed my bags in the soda and moving out of rock. I got the makings of a tennis champ.
So Dave, here we are at the Charles Hotel, an iconic Perth venue that is still standing, fortunately. You cut your teeth back in the old suburban boy days, playing at pub gigs such as this. What's it like returning to Perth to play these sort of shows?
Well, it's fantastic to do any show, and the Charles is great because it was that original, I think it was part of that huge boom from the 70s and 80s and early 90s, I guess. And most of the others have now been bulldozed down, changed into retirement homes or something. But the Charles is still intact, and it's great. Look, it's not so much the building, obviously, really. It's the people that liked the music before and have been supportive of me for years and years, and they still come along and still dig the song. And I get a chance tonight, for the first time in 30 odd years, I've got a chance to kind of present a whole lot of new songs.
Sell parsley pretending it was dope, and when anyone confronted him, hey man, I got ripped off too. My name is Joey Black.
What were some of your favourite venues back in the day?
Look, the best one for me was the Shenton Park. When we first started, there were the only pub kind of in my bailiwick that was doing anything reasonably regularly was the Victoria Hotel at Subiaco. The Beagle Boys used to play a gig there. And then there was a place called Keaton's in Fremantle, the old Orient Hotel, that did a couple of gigs. And touring bands might play at the White Sands or the Sandgroper, but we weren't quite big enough for that yet. So I knocked on the doors of virtually every pub, I reckon, in Perth and said, look, I've got a band, we could do this. Of course, most of them laughed at you and threw you out. But the Shenton Park gave us a go. We established ourselves at the Victoria Hotel and at Albert's Tavern in the City Little Underground venue that Loaded Dice used to play at. And then when we started to build a following, I went to the Shenton Park because I thought that's about the right size, and they put us on, and that became, well after the suburbs.
Against his head he felt a gun up. I said, "Bub, why did you come?" He said, I had nothing to lose. I had nothing to lose.
Stayed as a kind of independent or new ground breaking venue, and it was always great for us. It just was a great mix of people from nurses, students, labourers, with the collie dog on the back of the truck. Everyone kind of mixed and got on well.
Very different times, a lot more simple, and probably people complained about what Perth was like back in the day, but now look back with a lot of fond memories for simpler times. How much do you feel Perth has changed, I suppose culture-wise, from then to now?
Look, I think as you say, the world has changed, so Perth has changed along with it. What I think was really interesting about Perth in those times, or as you say, maybe was the complete opposite of interesting, was that it was incredibly homogenous. Like, we were all kind of white, lower middle class to upper middle class kids. Most of the people out and about fitted into that, and didn't matter whether their parents might be Italian or whatever, but you all grew up with a Laminex table that you ate your breakfast on. Most people had black and white TVs until the 70s, and a few people got it. The doctor lived in where I lived in Bicton. We had the doctor on one street. Next door to him was a guy who I think did accounts at BP down at Kwinana. My dad was a butcher. Barry Ray, the servo owner, was the next. So you had this incredibly homogenous experience, and it was great for me when I was writing and doing songs there, because if I did Suburban Boy or Mugs Game, 95% of the population instantly understood what I was talking about. Now, they might have considered themselves to be above the suburban boy thing. They might have thought they were too cool and they were into the Stones or Pink Floyd or more likely disco. But there was that homogeneity. And I think Perth is probably still slightly more than, say, a place like Sydney or Melbourne maybe has that. But there's no doubt Australia is very, very different, and it's really hard to, I think we're much more segmented. It's hard for anybody to be able to put their finger on something and go, oh, that is the beating pulse of my little part of the nation, It's a lot harder to do that.
You've always had a lot of room for your past, even when you've gone on and done very different and challenging creative endeavours. And only in the last week you've released a new From the Suburbs single. I'm on Facebook, but where are my friends? What's it been like to go back into that headspace or that creative space again, given that there's also an album coming up with that as well?
Yeah, look, it was a fascinating thing for me, Bob, because I've spent the best part of 10 years full on writing television, and whereas before, up until about 2000, I could do music and write books and things, but once I got into writing full on drama TV, it became all your time got sucked away, and so there's nothing else to do. And then the last couple of years, a couple of the things, commitments dropped away, shows didn't get renewed, and I had time on my hands, and I started to write books again and fragments of songs. And I thought, it had been a while since I'd actually sat down and wrote them. And eventually I said, I've got to put aside like 3 months, sit down and write these songs and complete them. And one of the ideas that I had, the first idea of the songs that I was doing was I'm on Facebook, but where's my friends? I'm on Facebook, but where's my friends? Because I was just noticing even people my age, they're all getting on Facebook and then someone snubs somebody else and their whole life becomes built around their computer screen or their phone and who's talking to them or who isn't. And what I found interesting about that was I thought I came up with that phrase, I'm on Facebook, where's my friends? And it reminded me of songs that the Kinks and the Who used to do, like Dedicated Follower of Fashion, oh, gee, if I only wear the right clothes, people will like me. And Substitute, it's this great belief in people that the external can somehow, or the trappings can somehow make up for any inadequacy of their own. And that got me then thinking about the whole thing of my own journey in life and where I am now. And so out of that evolved a bunch of songs, and I decided to redo a couple of old songs. And the old idea came up that was When. And When was a title that worked for me because it unified conceptually these different lines of thought that I had, and when in this case is all about time and about the space that we are in time. And when I like is a completely ambiguous word. If I say, when we go on stage tonight, we'll do this, there's an expectation we're talking about something. If I said, when we did Supreme Court Gardens in 1979, just by the context, you've gone from the past to the present. So, and I think all of us are these little floating bubbles in space that are constantly influenced and buffeted by the past, the present, and potential future. So,
and it's when as a statement, not a question.
It could be either, and that's what I like about when.
When is a good question. People say when, and maybe in about 5 weeks. Got a few.
I wanted enigmatic, and even the cover, Bled Butcher, who another Bicton boy, he shot the cover for me, and we talked about it, and I said, I've got this idea that I want, and Bled, bless his heart, had to go and wade out into Sydney Harbour and take a shot from me in the water, looking out into space as to when. But it sounds a bit airy-fairy and philosophical, but then that's where the best stuff comes from.
That's what it's for.
Yeah.
Also, with the single, I'm on Facebook, but where are my friends? It kind of, in my mind, the difference between what the word friend or the notion of friends means, that in the from the suburbs days in the 70s, it meant they were the people in the back of the ute going to the show, and these days it's this other form of what that means on Facebook. And you may have a lot of friends on Facebook, but will they help you move house or drive you to the airport or pick you up? Is that something you've given thought to in that song or throughout
that's exactly the journey of the song. The whoever the invisible narrator of that song starts off buying the new computer and sits down and then is having a nervous breakdown because no one signed up to be his friend, and in the end sells the computer and goes to the pub and actually mingles with real people, and these are my friends. So I'm not on Facebook, and here's my friends.
40 years later, here we are. First time anywhere in the world that publicly anyone has heard us do the song. In 40 years' time, you can look back and when we're doing the next gig and say, oh yeah, this was Dave talking about Facebook, you know, that funny thing that's changed our lives. I'm on Facebook, but where's my friends? I saved up my cash and I bought my new computer. iPad camera, big wide screen. My Snapchat's all uploaded. There's no microchip outloaded. And I've been waiting 6 days, 1 hour 17. I'm on Facebook, but where's my friends? This can't be how my story ends. I'm telling you there's something wrong.
And Facebook can be a wonderful and a fabulous tool, as can all social media. But I think the problem is that people mistake that for being a reality. You know, it's a kind of a crutch that people can grab hold of and think, oh, that's, I'm popular, I've got friends. Or conversely, I'm not popular because people aren't, signing up. So that's exactly the journey of that protagonist.
Yeah. Welcome back to Perth City Talks with our special guest, David.
And Ben and a few of the other youngsters in the audience will get those thumbs going and get out to the community that I'm on Facebook, but where's my friends? Yeah, that's good. Don't put a picture of us guys there. We'll get some sort of hot young models or dudes, put them out the front. And let's get a hit out of Facebook.
Well, I guess it's like the postcard industry, which must just be non-existent now, and that people used to misuse postcards as well, but you just didn't happen to hear about it.
Well, it's funny you say about the postcard, because some friends of mine just came back from overseas and they said, we tried to send you a postcard, we couldn't find any to send,
It's all now.
Yeah.
And another thing...
Probably a lie.
Yeah, must have been.
Probably just didn't want to say it.
But another thing with that is with social media and the notion of crowdfunding, and that you're putting a call out to friends and fans and supporters, to help get the album out, and that they can be listed on the liner notes as a friend who's contributed to helping put something that they want to see come out. That's the good side of it, isn't it?
Yeah. If you want to be a suburban soldier, it'll cost you $30, and you get your name on the insert. Some of my great fans down here have already done it. Kate Ingleton's always, of course, jumped in there. Let's go. Or you can donate even more. For $100, you can be a suburban general, and I will send you the CD as well, and a badge or two. So it's basically giving me extra money so that we've got enough money to record, the album's all recorded and will be mixed, but we actually then want to pay somebody to publicise it and get it out there and do a video clip or two. If you would like to do that, you can sign up down up at the front desk, or you can go onto my website. We've only got 48 hours to go because we're getting close to finishing off the CD, but your name will be there, it'll be on the website. In perpetuity, you'll be part of the history of Australian rock, if you would like to do it. And if not, it doesn't matter, we still love you.
I mean, I made sure that I had the budget to do the actual recording of the album and do that. But the thing is, then you want to actually get it out to people. So I'm trying to raise some money to get enough money together to make film clips for a couple of the songs, and to hire a publicist for 1 or 2 days to get it out there, disseminate the material. Because look, nothing changes in that sense if you're with one of the big Warners or EMI, etc. You've still got a much bigger leg up in terms of getting coverage.
Yeah.
But it's not as exclusive, and I guess the flip side is that these days, if you do crack it on YouTube or something, you can instantly have a massive worldwide hit that was completely out of the realms of people like myself, or the Fingerprints, or Loaded Dice, or Buffalo Headstand, or any of those Perth bands in the past.
You've come back to the record and release kind of scenario in music, but which makes me think, like, as an outsider, it appeared that music opened the door for you to then look at writing books and plays and for film and television. Was there a plan at the start that you could eventually find a way to do all these things, or has it been a sort of a pleasing evolution that these new doors have opened up?
Well, when I was 12 years old, you had to fill in something at school. They decided, what did you want to be? And I wanted to be a writer. And because I read books and I thought that would be fantastic. And of course my poor dad, what's the point of that? You can't. And well, it was true. By the time I was 16 or 17, I thought, well, yes, I can't write novels at this age. That doesn't make sense. But I can express myself writing songs, and that was the sensible thing for me to do as a young person. But I always wanted, even when I was on the band with the band in the late 70s and 80s, I'd be trying to write stories. So for me, what happened is, I guess I did eventually get the opportunity to test myself out on that, and I think in some ways having that background helps in some ways, in that it gets you to people's notice. They go, probably publishers might go, oh, maybe we can sell some books to some friends. And I think, again, the flip side of that is that a lot of people within that industry go, oh, well, he can't be any good because he was a musician, or, like you've snuck your way in through the back door somehow and you can't be good enough. So I think it's it helps you get attention, but it's harder for you to be taken perhaps seriously by some people within those industries.
Okay. Does the creative process vary between the different endeavours that you have, and are some notably easier or harder than others?
Yeah, it does. I mean, they're all hard. To do anything well is hard. To write a song, a good song, is really, really hard. And look, I've only had one proper hit pop song in Suburban Boy. I've had a hit album, and it's hard. I've probably, I've had probably more success, if you wanted to say, oh, they were hits in books or TV shows. But they each have their own little requirement. They're each a different mistress. Television is very much about skill, not so much about inspiration, because it's very rare that you're the person that they go, we love that series and we're going to take all your ideas and you can do it. So generally you're coming in at the tail end of some other people who've made some suggestions, and so your job in television is very much skill-based. How can I tell a story in this particular time with these characters that people know? In novels, I tend to get an idea, boom, oh, that would be a great idea, or those characters would be good, or I want to tell a story that's set in the Kimberley and that has an element of Germany, which is what happened in the last book. I want to take these two different complete extremes of geography and culture and bring them together. And in music, it's just, I just walk along, I don't know where it comes from, or I'm sitting down at the keyboard and a kind of a phrase, and a lyrical phrase and a music phrase almost come up at the same time, and that is the genesis of the song.
The background body and the forehand smash, the lovely ladies and the prize in cash. Rock is dying, but I'm gonna let not taking me down.
Verse, chorus, or middle, or and then from that point on, it also changes, because in the band it becomes a lot more collaborative, where you've got people putting stuff in. My experience with film is that once the writer has delivered the script that everyone loves and that gets funded, it's then the writer it's completely uncollaborative for the writer. They're excluded from the process while everyone else decides what they want to do. And the most satisfying is probably, I think, not the most satisfying. Music's very satisfying, but it's hard to kind of keep a grip of. The most individual one, I think, is novel writing. You come up with the idea and your editor will help you, but you are driving that train. And I suppose sometimes playwriting a little bit to that extent.
As someone who's always been a supporter and champion in WA for the arts and sport, what do you think of the sort of the gap between WA support, or the WA government's support for sport versus art?
The WA government, compared to other places, has been very supportive of the arts compared to some other states. New South Wales, for example. I would say WA government's extremely supportive of various things. It would have been, I don't know if people remember, but when the first scratchies, the lottery money was all supposed to go to the arts, and then they realised, I think after about 6 months, oh, heck, they're getting more money than we are from anything else. And so that all got taken as consolidated revenue by the government, and arts got doled out a bit more. But look, I think two things. And the other thing, I'll just add my 5 cents worth, is that I think anybody who wants to sit back and let the government support them as an artist is in the wrong caper. If you want to be an artist, whether it's a sculptor, a musician, a writer, you will bloody well go out and do it. It doesn't matter if you have to crawl over hot coals and broken glass, you will do it. But where I think the government can really help is that once you've got to that point, how do we help you get to the next stage? And what so for example, virtually anybody can record an album. Anybody who's committed will record an album or a single. The government doesn't have to give people money to do that. They'll do it. They'll find a way to do it. They'll work cleaning toilets or, lugging stuff around a supermarket at 3 a.m. to do that. But what you need is that next stage. For example, what I'm raising the money for when for, if the government had someone who was like a full-time PR person for that stuff, who knew all the contacts in, and whether it was books or art galleries or whatever, and said, hey, this guy Bob Gordon, he's got a great book, you have to read it. I think that's where governments can really become proactive to help artists get to that next stage where you can't help yourself. We don't think in that kind of corporate mentality. And for my 2 bob's worth, that's where governments can help now.
Yeah. Given that you've been named a living treasure, it kind of springs to mind the notion of someone who's written a lot of books, perhaps considering an autobiography that would tie all the elements and stories and ventures and adventures together. Is that something you've looked at or considered?
Look, it's been suggested to me by a couple of my agents who've probably looked at the royalty checks from my other stuff and gone, well, this is going nowhere. Look, I was very, very honoured when I looked at the other people, the quality of the people who had received that. It was great to think that, in a sense, the arts establishment had considered that I was up to that, because I've won very few awards of anything or been recognised. I've always kind of been a bit of the maverick out there, and so that was good. But to be honest, it was also very scary. Well, because you get living treasure, it's like, well, they're not going to be around that much longer, and so we better give them something while they're still here. But it was important for me, or great for me, because of the fact that so much of my stuff is Western Australian based, even though I live in Sydney. It's very much about that. I've always tried to push the barrow of WA arts as being its own thing. It's, and popular arts and entertainment. And it was nice to get some recognition for that.
You've been watching Perth City Talks with our special guest, Dave Warner. My name's Bob Gordon.